What's up, folks, and welcome to Indie Ramble. So, here's something that is quite a bit different from what you normally see on this channel, but it ended up being really compelling for me. This is a game that I actually tried to stream originally, and, well, it frankly wasn't a good game for that format, and people weren't too interested. But the more I played it on my own, the more I really came to see this as something special. So this is the King's Dilemma Chronicles, and I hadn't actually heard of what this was based on before this game came out, but it's actually based on a board game, which is kind of interesting. You actually only play it by yourself, at least this version of it. But if you like Choices Matter games, this is one where every single choice can have a very large impact. I'll tell you right now, this is not going to be for everyone. There's a lot of text, there's a lot of mechanics to balance, and it can get complicated, but I found it really interesting, and I've already finished a run of this. You can do numerous different runs, and yeah, it's really fascinating and really well put together. And I actually never covered it on the channel, but a while back my girlfriend and I played through another kingdom management game where choices matter called Yes, Your Grace, which was one of my favorite games of that year. And this is not the same thing. Yes, Your Grace has different ideas behind it, but this shares a lot of similar stuff in that you're trying to guide your kingdom through a very difficult time involving some very difficult choices. And I'm not going to try to spoil this too much because the choices and the stories that come out of those are really the key element of this. And I'm going to try to explain this as succinctly as I can without this video being a million hours long, but there is a lot to this. But the game's writing is so good and so tight that even though this is fairly complicated, it's something that you can get used to fairly quickly, and I'm going to show you that. So this takes place in a fictional kingdom, and there's basically a prophecy that says after a certain amount of time, a lunar eclipse event is going to happen that's going to cause a massive uprising that could end the empire. And you have to try to run your kingdom while also preparing for that, and then eventually when that uprising happens, dealing with it from one of various different angles. So I'm going to say that here. Now, the one thing I will say is that the game does have fairly good tutorial. Like I said, what I love about this game is that its writing is very compacted. It conveys a lot without using too many words, and that's key because if you didn't want to make every choice in this a novel, that's very important. And I think the writing in this is what really makes it excel at what it does. So these are all the different tutorial things. As you can see, there's a lot of them, but it doles these out over time, so it doesn't shove it all in your face right away, and things will start to link together, and it'll start to make sense to you after a while. So let me give you a quick rundown of the UI here so that we can know what we're looking at. So you have a number of different dilemmas and choices that you have to make from those, and you can jump around and attack these in whatever order you want. Each of these is their own little sort of self-contained storyline. So you can see here the value of might, the King's Dilemma. Out here in the world, there's another King's Dilemma thing. So you'll eventually have multiple story paths that you can follow, and the order in which you attack them can have as much impact to them as the choices you make within them. And that's what's kind of interesting about this. So you'll pick one of these as you go. We'll get to that shortly. And then what you have over here is the different types of resources that your kingdom has. So you have influence, you have wealth, you have morale, you have welfare, which is a lot of that is tied to food, and you have knowledge. Now, you see in this meter over here that we've got this sort of black section in the middle and these two lighter sections on top. So you're going to go through a number of different generations of the king in this game. You have a limited amount of time with each monarch, and each of them has different traits. So the one that I'm playing right now is called Extremist. So generally, in order to get the most bonuses to put towards your preparations for the uprising, you want to have all of these resources either up here or down here, not in the middle. Other types of kings, you may want them in the middle, or you may want them somewhere else, and that will change. And you have to pick a different type of king every new monarch run. So once this guy has run his course, you have to pick a different one, and you can't always pick the same one over and over again. and you have to strategize based around that, which I think is very interesting. So you have different resources down here as well, and these are relevant to not only what you can accomplish in a given run of the kingdom, but also what you can do for your preparations. And these are what those are called. So in order to prepare for the uprising, you want to try to have as many of these different preparations together as possible. And you sort of see it sort of summarizes what the core mechanics of that are here. And you want to try, the way you do that is by solving dilemmas and making your kingdom end up in as much in accordance with your monarch's personality as you can. And the more of these you unlock, the easier the uprising will be to deal with. Now, for each different choice that you make, whoops, I picked the wrong menu. Here we go. So I'm going to show you what it's like when you make a choice here, and we'll go around what the impacts are. So let's say, so this is a brand new run, by the way. So I'm trying not to impact this too much. So let's pick this one. So when you pick a dilemma, you get this. There's some really nice art in this too. So it comes up here with a little bit of a rundown of the dilemma. So Murano, a rich merchant from the remote desert city called the, quote, City of Tents, wants to negotiate a lucrative trade agreement. Among his samples of goods is a slave concubine in chains. He claims the woman comes from a desert temple that allegedly hides the golden map, a fabled item we've been seeking for decades. Many of our people are against slavery. Do we force Murano, a rich merchant, to free the slave? And you can see what I'm saying about the writing there, because there was only 2 different small screens of text, and yet there was a lot in there. And this game absolutely excels at giving you a lot of context and a lot of information in very few words. Every dilemma you get is going to have no more than, I think, 3 of those screens, and it's almost always 2. And so you can go through dilemmas very quickly. Like, this game is always moving. It doesn't make you sit for a long period of time. But where you're going to sit the most is probably here. So this is where you make the decisions. Your decisions are always yay or nay. It's always yes or no questions. And this is where you will have the biggest impact. So when you start the game, you're given a little quiz of just a few questions that will help determine which kingdom or which monarchy within the kingdom you represent. There's a bunch of different ones, each of which have their own different beliefs and practices to them. And you're working with sort of this council here, if you will. And in order to, you have, this is why it's called the King's Dilemma, because you have to try to make what you think is the best choice, but you're not the only factor here. Because as you can see, these are the choices and how they will impact the statistics over here. So, because my current king is an extremist, ideally, you want to make choices that will put the resources either in the extreme top or the extreme bottom, because that's how you get the most rewards. But in addition to that, you have these council members, and you have to try to keep them on your side. And you can see, depending on the choices I make, it will impact my relationships with those. These are the votes they want me to take. So if you side against somebody for too long, you can cause significant conflict and strife, and you have to be adherent to that. But what you can also do, you see I have 8 coins down here. Well, if I'm like, you know what, I want to vote aye, but I want everybody on my side. Well, we can do that. Spent 4 of my coins, and I bribed him, so now he's on my side. Alternatively as well, certain difficult choices that go really against the grain, you can do as well, but that's going to cost 4 of these, I forget what these are called, but these little shield icons down here. These replenish at the end of each monarchy, or the end of each king's reign, but if you use them up too early, you may be forced to make choices that you don't want. So that's something you have to be adherent to as well. And in addition, I'll show you this. So I'm going to make this choice. I'm going to say aye. So, we cannot tolerate slavery. We force the merchant to free his concubine and send him away. This compromises our trade agreement, but our people rejoice that we stood up for the poor woman. So, we made the people happy, but we're not making as much money. Many are also excited at the prospect that she may reveal the location of the mythical golden map. Legend says it leads to an endless fountain of liquid gold. So you see, this is very old school medieval, right? There's a lot of there's superstition and there's mythology and there's magical supernatural elements in this as well. So you can see our choice to free the merchant slave compromised our relationship with the southern desert lands before it even started. And then you add it to the archives. And if you archive a dilemma, it means you can't go back to it later. But also, anything that advances one of the multiple storylines that eventually leads to the eclipse and the uprising, you'll get a little bit of a rundown here. So I'm not going to read all this out, but you can see here, this is kind of the game's equivalent of a story advancing cutscene. But you can see it's only 5 screens, and they're short, but they tell you volumes. It's really impressive to me. Like, I continually got more and more impressed with the writing as we went. So here we go. This is the Eclipse screen, so you can see each of these represents one of the core storylines, and when these all fill out is when the uprising starts. So you have to prepare for it in that time. And now you can see what we did. So this said it was going to go down, this said it was going to go up. You can get kind of an idea of how much they're going to move, but it's never clear to you. So you have to be willing to take the risk when you make your choice as well, that the resources are going to move as much as you hope. And with these moving up and down, this meter moves as well. And what this does, it's what's called the equilibrium of your society. It's, you want to also try to keep this in the middle, because it gets, if these goes too high in one direction or another, it can end your reign. If this gets all the way up to one end, you will either abdicate or get killed. And then you have to start over with a new monarch. Not the whole game, you just start your next run. Alternatively, as you make more choices, this will start to creep up into this area here where you see there's these little skulls. And the higher up this gets, you start to have a coin flip where, once again, it can determine whether or not the king ends up dead. So if you push this too hard, you run higher and higher risks of ending your reign that way. And it's perfectly normal to go through a number of different kings over the course of the run. In fact, you have to. You can keep no one king alive for the entirety of the game. But sometimes, especially if it's a king that you like, you're going to want to keep them alive longer, to keep to work within the mechanics that you like. And this is the thing about this, is every choice you make, every single choice you make, will not be 100% what you want. Something is always going to have to be sacrificed, whether it's relationships with the council, whether it's resources, whether it's how much your societal balance gets altered, or, you know, in order to adhere to those things and keep those things in balance, you may have to make a choice that you don't like and progress one of the storylines in a negative way. And that is far and away this game's greatest strength. I have had dilemmas that I've had to solve where I have had to sit and stare at the screen and think for sometimes 10 plus minutes, going like, well, how is this going to affect this? Or, you know, what is this going to do? Or is this going to be a problem? Or how is this going to affect this? You know, and you're trying to juxtapose all of those different variables in your head in order to figure out what you should do. And it's supposed to represent the difficult parts of being a ruler of an empire like this. Is you can't please everyone, and sometimes you can't even please yourself, and you've got to think about the impact of everything, both in the short term and the long term. You know, are you able to play 4D chess or not, if you will? And that's what made this game really compelling to me. And once I sat down with it, I just plowed through almost the entirety of my run in one go, because you always want to see what the impact of your decisions are going to be. What's going to happen? What events am I going to trigger? How am I going to how am I going to advance the story forward? You know, did I make the right choice, or did I just hose myself? And because of the tightness of the writing in this, it's the most time you will spend sort of staring at one screen is when you're trying to make those decisions and trying to figure out what you should do. You're not going to have to spend 10 minutes reading pages and pages and tomes of information and backstory about each decision before you have to make it. If it worked like that, this game would have immediately been a turn-off for me. If I have to read a small novel before I can make each choice, I'd be like, okay, like, I got stuff to do here, you know? But I think that's what's so masterful about how this is put together, is it just, it's always moving, and though your choices have big impact, you don't have to feel... The weight on the player in this game is the weight of the choices you have to make, not the information leading up to those choices. And that's a very key mechanic that a lot of choices matter games don't get. They think that they need to dump a torrent of information on you so that you can be the most informed, rather than just giving you the basics and saying, okay, now think it through. And I've never played a game that handles choices the way this one does. And, you know, for a developer that I hadn't heard of before, it's quite impressive the work they've done in translating this board game to this. I'm not going to lie, I really want to try the board game, the actual game, now, which I think is one of the greatest compliments you can make to this. And in addition to that, I just love the production values of this. The art in this is it all looks very hand-drawn. It's all very clean. Some of the images in this convey the heavy weight of the situations you're in, like this, you know, while still being relatively simple. I think the music in this is great. I love the UI, the font choices, the sound effects are all fairly subtle. The sound effects are all fairly subtle. It's just a very nice presentation. It's colorful, it's not boring, but it takes what many people would consider a very boring game mechanic, which is frankly a ton of menus and choices, and makes it very pleasant to look at. It's not hard on the eyes, and it's very comfortable looking game and UI. And as I said, there's a lot of math happening under the hood of this thing. You know, there's a lot of different logical elements and variables that have to play together, and it works great. See, I overdid it here. See, now I'm up there, and watch, king is abdicated. So, and here we go. Here's the next one. So I wasn't an extremist, sorry, I was a rebel, was the type of king it gave me. But now, so it refills some of these things here, gives some of the basics. So here are my two choices, and sometimes you will get more. So I can play Rebel again, though you don't always have this option. And if you do play the same one a certain number of times, you get extra bonuses for that too. Or you can play Greedy, which is that you are focused on keeping your people deprived because you're a greedy king. But a lot of the time, this is going to force you to play as a type of character that you're not going to necessarily want to. And, like, I like role-playing games that let you play as whatever type of person you want, but this is cool because it will sometimes force you to play as the choice you wouldn't have made. And if you want to succeed, you have to play like that character. You can't go, well, you're telling me I'm being a greedy king, but I don't like that, so I'm not going to play that way. You will fail if you do that. So it forces you to think outside the box and think as the type of person that you wouldn't normally be if you had the option, which can be cool when done well. So you see here we have 3 white crowns and 2 black crowns, so we can only build 2 of these different things right now. So you have to look at each one of these and determine what's going to be better for us. So you pick a thing, it starts it out, it's in progress. Usually within a reign or 2 it will be completed, and you'll start to fill this out, and then that will help you figure out what you want to do there. So what you also have here is these are the other kingdoms that you're working with. So these are the ones this is the one that I got, but you have these other ones here, and it shows your various relationships with them. So you can, if you have enough coins, you can reveal what's called a narrative goal. And the narrative goal basically is a very simple objective, and it's not given to you with a lot of information. So each of the kingdoms, by the way, does have a little write-up like this. So this will give you a goal that is not necessarily very obvious, but is very lucrative if you can complete it. So you can reveal these narrative goals for each of the different kingdoms if you want to try them out. I don't think I ever completed one of these. They're quite tricky. And then you see there's secondary goals as well. Now this is for my own kingdom, but you can reveal a narrative goal for each of these as well. And if you have enough coins, you can also form an alliance. It requires that you have enough of a relationship with them to do that, but it basically gives you a much stronger bond and allows you to vote against them more often before they start getting upset with you. That's effectively what that means. So as you can see, like I said, every choice in this game matters to a very significant degree. Everything has a major impact. And I've never played another game where the choices matter type of mechanic is so ingrained in the very core of everything to it. You know, a lot of choices matter games aren't really that. A lot of them are that you might get a few different dialogue options, but you end up in the same place regardless, you know, and this can change a lot depending on how you choose to approach it. And I really like that. You can easily play this probably dozens of times over and get different kinds of outcomes. I definitely intend to play it more often. And yeah, I don't mind board games, but I'm not the world's biggest board game guy, but this has really made me want to try the board game. And like I said before, I think that's probably one of the greatest compliments you can give something like this. And I'll tell you right now, this is not going to be for everyone. I think the developers know that it's not going to be for everyone. You've got to like making hard choices. There's not a lot of reading, but you've got to do some of that. And you've got to like the idea of having to play characters that you wouldn't always like to, and balancing huge numbers of different types of resources and decision makings in this, and understanding that the game is not always going to be nice to you. You are going to have to make decisions you don't want to, and you're going to have unexpected consequences. And a lot of gamers like things where everything is a lot more obvious and your impacts and choices are very clear to you before you make them. And that's fine. That's what you get entertainment out of. Go nuts. This is not that. This is for a different crowd. But I started it out going, this looks like a menu simulator. I don't know if this is really what I want. And in the end, it really, really surprised me. And I think this is a really standout title that that if you're into Choices Matter stuff, you should really look at, for sure. And honestly, I haven't fully explained all the complexities and nuances of this, but the tutorials in this are very, very good, and it will all click with you fairly quickly as you get going through it. Just very well designed, very well presented, and killer writing that really nails this. So yeah, that is The King's Dilemma Chronicles. It is out now. I highly recommend it, with all those caveats that I gave before. But I wasn't sure about it initially, and it really, really surprised me. I think this is something a lot of people should definitely take a look at. So thanks very much for watching, everybody. I do appreciate it. If you like what you saw here, please do all the normal YouTube things. It does help the channel out for weird and mysterious reasons. Leave a comment down below. Tell me, what do you think about this? Does this interest you? What are other, big time Choices Matter games that you think are interesting? I'd love to hear about those, and check out some more of those, because it's always something very cool. Definitely check out Yes Your Grace as well if you haven't. I haven't covered that game on this channel, but it is amazing. I do highly recommend it. And as always, you can follow me over at twitch.tv/pxabstraction for multiple variety streams a week. I cover other indie games as well as retro stuff over there, including things that are better suited to streaming than YouTube. We have a great community there, and I would love to see you be a part of it. Thanks again all, and I'll see you on the next Indie Ramble. You folks have yourselves a good one. Take it easy.